Welcome to the New Commission's Artist Talk series for the new site-specific artworks, sponsored by the Houston Airport System at George Bush Intercontinental Airport and Houston Hobby Airport, on behalf of the City of Houston's Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs. Hosted by Houston Arts Alliance Director of Civic Art and Design, Grace Zuniga. Please welcome Animalis Works.
My name is Dharmesh Patel. I am with Animalis Works. I am an artist, and our piece is called Wings. It's at the Houston Hobby Airport at the security checkpoint area. Live and work in Austin, Texas.
Are you from Texas?
I am not. I'm originally from outside New York City in New Jersey, but I came there at such a young age that I might as well be born there.
I see your name and then I see somebody else's name, and Animalis Works seems like an artist collective. So can you talk a little bit about the team dynamic and who else was involved in this project?
Yeah, so there's a couple of people. Autumn Ewald works with me. We partnered with as Animalis before, collaborating on public art pieces. We have several pieces throughout Texas, and temporary pieces in a bunch of other places. So, and that's basically the artist conceptualization team, and then work with Charlie Alvarado, who's part of Slash Plus ATX. He and I do a lot of the fabrication and installation for quite a few of our works. When you work at the scale that this piece is in, we have a lot of other collaborators that play a role, like the structural engineer, a lot of other consultants we use for trying to figure out the best way for some things to work. Because at this scale, the scale of our piece at Houston Hobby, it's beyond what a traditional artist would think of as a studio practice, where they work with a human scale size, have it be, a large human figure of that scale. But, this piece being 17 feet tall and weighing over 3,000 pounds, not only do you need heavy machinery to move it and work it, we have a lot of the pieces cut by a subcontractor, and they do it with the water jet and or a laser, depending on what the parts are. So, I also consider them part of our team, because without them and their expertise, a lot of this stuff just would not get done.
So the main core of your team, outside of like all the other people that are needed to make a public art, there's two of you, right?
Yeah.
So you mentioned that your piece was 17 feet high, 3,000 pounds. Can you describe to anyone watching a little more about the work?
It's 17 feet tall. It's about 8 feet by 5 feet wide at the base, and the piece kind of tapers into a two-dimensional wing flying through the sky. And there's 5,000 crystals within the piece. So it's one of those things that's like, you don't understand the scale of, at least, for us, it's like, oh yeah, we want this. And then it's like, oh, there's 5,000 crystals that we have to lay and make work for the piece. So
can you describe that relationship between the steel and the crystal a little more, and like how that came together?
A lot of our work deals with the memory of places, how people move through space. We call it the residue of curiosity. And if it was up to us, the steel would not be there. It would just be the crystals floating in the sky, or as a sculptural form, capturing the light and changing the relationship of the viewer, and how it changes throughout not only the day, but through the week, through the month, and through the year. So it's very analog. It's very dynamic, and in the sense that the piece and the light that we're trying to capture changes as time moves and your relationship to the piece moves.
It's interesting that you say the steel is kind of like a conduit or a vessel for the crystals and like that support system, because it
Yeah.
is such a grand piece. And it really is like, it's scale wise, it's a bit overwhelming because you go up to it and then you can really like start viewing the intricacies of and really like getting into the faceted crystal. So like it does really draw the viewer in, but it's interesting to think that the steel, this like heavy material, is like a conduit.
It is a conduit. I mean, if it was up to us and we can fight the nature of gravity, it wouldn't be there. But
Mhm.
the other consideration is that when you're making public art, where it's accessible to anyone passing by it and wanting to touch it, and that's like the sort of residue of curiosity for us, is that like most people look at art or look at their environment and pass by it because of their day-to-day routines where they're trying to get to. It's out of their mind, but once the attention is grabbed, they want to come up and see all the details. They want to see how that light is playing out, and it's refraction of sunlight. So as you're approaching it, it changes. And
Mhm.
when you get to it, it's different. And if you look through the crystal itself to the other side, you'll see that the image behind through the crystal is completely fragmented. A bee's eye view. Like, I don't know if anyone has ever seen those images, but like a bee's eye is made of millions of little lenses, and they see that as a composition of their viewpoint.
And can you talk a little bit about the significance of the shape? You mentioned that it goes from like three-dimensional to two-dimensional. And there have been a lot of conversations about like what kind of wing it is. And I didn't know if that was really open-ended for you all. Or...
It is open-ended for us. It doesn't, the wing doesn't really represent a specific form, have it be a plane, bird, and fly. Really what the inspiration was that, looking through the history of Hobby Airport, it played such a large role in terms of aviation for the Houston Metroplex. I mean, what we consider the Metroplex, but back then, I believe it was the 1930s when the airport was first commissioned. It was a small airport with one regional airline, and it just was a way for people to come into the city itself. And as it grown, there's been additional airports added to the Houston Metroplex. So we really were inspired by the role that not only the airport but the sort of industry within Houston, and considering the aerospace and then all the other companies that have come through it, were really inspired by that idea of taking flight.
At the bottom of the base, there are these triangular forms that kind of go up. Can you talk about that a little bit? Is that purely like structural or?
In order to describe a curve that's twisting and rotating and changing from 3D to 2D, you kind of triangulate that formwork to get the panels. And then, the other consideration was that because of the size, the piece needed to be made into multiple parts. There was no way that we were going to be able to work as a whole sculpture in our studio in Austin, ship it to Houston without just, a completely different level of considerations for how we moved and worked on the piece. So it was natural to triangulate it. I mean, even, the largest pieces are about 150 pounds, which again is like, a little more than one person, but two people can handle it readily.
So is the form was made mindful of the location where you're at, the transportation of, and then when you brought all of the pieces to site, did you weld them together? Or how is it put together on site?
So it's all those triangular pieces are panelized, so they are bolted together on site. And again, that was one of the things that was part of the consideration, was that the Alton and his team wanted to be able to move it at a future date. And then, the fully assembled sculpture at the end of the day was over 3,000 pounds, and there was no effective way to be able to move it at a future date. So once you go down that road, well, then, where do you break it? A lot of people don't understand why a brick is the size that it is, because a person can carry it and lay it down without any additional tools. And that was the kind of logic behind this piece itself.
What were your biggest technical challenges that you faced during this process?
You know, so this piece, technically, the steel is sandwiching the crystals. And then every angle between the triangular panels is completely unique. Each shape is unique. There's actually, there's two sides to it that are unique. So like, it's symmetrical in one regard. And so all the parts along that mirror line are the same, but every panel that goes from the bottom to the top, and then what we call the leg of the piece is different also. So, coming up with a way to understand that, this also needs to change as it's going up. So, making the parts, there's like a what I call a mending plate between the panels, and each one of those is unique. So, and that's also something about our work that comes up, is that like, oh, we make a lot of parts and 95% of them are absolutely unique. You can't misplace one to another without the sculpture not working.
And is your process like everything's digitized?
When you get down to that kind of work, we're not compromising with that form. The challenge is, yes, you can do it with by hand, and the challenge is that, like, yes, we could do this by hand. Given the schedule of the piece, it would take us 5 times as long. It'd be a 5-year-long project, just because we're doing it by hand as opposed to using the tools that are available to us.
And how was this experience different from your previous experiences working in different cities and municipalities?
The biggest difference was that the turnaround was so quick. We essentially got the go ahead to fabricate this piece around this time last year in 2022. So I just think of it as like the beginning of the new year in 2022, and we were scheduled to install it in late August, early September.
Was there a big challenge, or what, I guess, was there a uniqueness in the challenge of like x-raying the floor for you all?
The security checkpoint at Hobby, specifically of where we were, is that there are these huge cables within the floor that cannot be disturbed or drilled into. If we hit one of those, that would severely compromise the floor of that lobby.
What do you all want the viewer to experience as they're, passing by, seeing your piece?
If our piece is successful, and from what I've heard so far, it is, that people take a moment and see the piece and recognize that, like, hey, there's more than just to get to your departure gate. There's things at the airport that again, slow down the passage from getting into the airport to the gate. So it's creating this temporal space during that journey of that, of what flying out of an airport is. So and obviously for the staff, and like, when we were installing, many of the TSA personnel were very intrigued by what the sculpture was and what we were trying to do there. So, it's also it's another level where the people who are there on a day-to-day basis get to see the sculpture as it's changing and have a different experience of it than people who are using the airport as a departure area.
Yeah, when we went to go look at it, the police came up to Alton and they're like, we were taking bets on what kind of wing it was. And I think that's kind of funny.
Yeah, and it's abstract. I mean, it would seem like it's an airport wing, airplane wing, but that's just you're never going to represent that at the scale that we were working with. So